Bollocks.
Bollocks, that's an underutilized word. Hey everybody, welcome to the Sopranos Season 3 Retrospective. I'm Chris D'Amato.
I'm Paul Mancini.
And I'm Jordan Hugh.
And we're really pumped to be here. These retrospectives are one of my favorite things to do on this podcast, record these, because we get to talk about Season 3 in its totality, what made it work, how awesome it was, pick out our top threes in a lot of great categories. I want to address the elephant in the room really quickly. We do not have Lily with us. She has been with us for the last two retrospectives. She had a family commitment and was unable to be here today.
I know, so sad. This is the first retrospective we've done without Lily.
Yes. So that's unfortunate, but we're going to make the most of it.
Yeah,
because,
to make up for it, we'll add her into an extra episode of Season 4.
Yeah, I love that idea.
That's a good idea, right?
Yep. So, Season 3. We're done with Season 3. First of all, I mean, depending on how you want to categorize Season 6, because it's a two-parter, we're halfway through the story.
Yeah.
How do you feel about things? Season 3, it's over. Just general thoughts on how you felt about 3, how it started, how it ended, how it wrapped up, what it adds to the Sopranos mythos.
For me, it's my favorite season so far.
Interesting.
For me, they keep getting better. I think I've done a little bit of reading, and people certainly seem to think, and they're probably right, that seasons 1 and 2 are more crafted, and seasons 1 and 2 also have the benefit of being self-contained. You can stop after you watch them, whereas season 3 leaves you on a cliffhanger. It's
the first season that ends in a way that they're clearly setting up the next season.
Right.
It's like they shot and wrote seasons 1 and 2 as if the show could be canceled in any second.
Yeah. So even though that's the case, and even though it feels a little incomplete at the end and maybe the stakes are not as high, this season had more, for me at least, more impactful individual episodes that I can't ever forget. And some of those are kind of traumatic, but I mean in a good way. I mean TV that affected me so profoundly that I can't get certain images, certain scenes out of my mind. And of course I am certainly kind of obliquely referring to things like University or Employee of the Month or Amorphu, but they'll live with me forever, and I appreciate that about them. I like that they're powerful even though that they're sad or violent or whatever.
Yeah, that's well said. My own take is that actually I think season 1 and 2 are both, I would say, probably more fun. That's the way I would look at them. But that's part of the power here, is that there's something that happens here that I think is entirely conscious, where the show is still fun, it still has great funny moments that are playful, weird. They are making a decision in some of these episodes to deal with stories that are showing you some pretty bleak and ugly things about the world. And in the case of University, particularly about what these guys that are our heroes in the show, what they will countenance, and in fact even what they breed, what they create in terms of an environment and how women are treated, etc. And I think that it was gutsy in terms of what they did. Even if the season had not clicked and worked as well, I would still have to give credit, man, they really went for it. But they went for it, and I think it really works.
Yeah.
And I think the show takes a step in terms of that irony and the use of bleak humor. Another example that I'm going to come back to in this retrospective is Tony telling off Noah. Not only the balls to do that scene, but the balls to make it funny. It is funny. So the show is taking a step here. It owes a lot to the first 2 seasons for laying down the track for it. And there's new ideas, there's new concepts, and there's new characters that are fun. Having to deal with a character who in some ways is like Richie Aprile, but ends up being both a better gangster and a more useful person. So instead of figuring out how to get rid of them, you have to figure out how to live with them, is actually maybe the most interesting place the show could go. This season also, another thing, just a personal thing, and maybe it's just a sentimental choice, but it has my favorite single storyline of the whole series.
The Gloria Trillo story?
The Gloria Trillo story. Yeah. And that's not, there's so many wonderful stories, but I just think this one clicks. I love also how in some ways it's almost an accident. I don't think Gloria Trillo would have been in this season if Nancy Marchand hadn't died. I think that Gloria Trillo steps in to fill this void in which they were going to do a story where Livia was maybe the witness for the prosecution. She died, that story's gone.
Yeah.
Then you resurrect this figure, and it helps Tony. It points Tony toward figuring out some things about himself.
Yeah, that's the only other comment I would offer in just trying to give a season the shape that it needs. Acknowledging the death of Nancy Marchand and the loss of that character.
Huge.
It's huge.
And it could have, in less competent hands, really dovetailed the show.
It could have ruined the show, actually.
Yeah.
But for me, season 3, it ends up hitting. It's a big hit for me, but it's off such a wild pitch. Because Mr. Ruggerio's Neighborhood and Proshai Lavushka, the first 2 episodes of this season, the combined 2 that I believe you said aired on the same evening when they first aired, that's a wild pitch to start your season off of. Like, I don't know what the water cooler was like on the Monday after that double, because they're both so bizarre. One is so light and so odd, and the other is so dark and so brooding. And this is your start, you know?
Yeah.
Odd. It's not till episode 3 that the season... was that Fortunate Son?
Fortunate Son.
It's not till Fortunate Son that the season actually begins to regulate and you start to recognize it for itself again.
Yeah.
It's tough. Those first 2 episodes are really, really challenging pieces, and they're good. It is a peculiar opener.
For my big take on season 3, I tried to ask myself after finishing why, when I think about the show, and we're going to honor our no spoilers policy, so I'm not going to talk about seasons 4, 5, and 6 yet, but when I think about the show as a whole, 3 flies under the radar for me when I think about my favorite seasons. And I wonder why, because anytime I actually watch season 3, I'm riveted. I fully agree with everything you guys have just said. So why does season 3 fall kind of under the radar for me when I think about the show in its totality? It's because in many ways it is a transitional season from what the show started as to what it becomes as it reaches the end.
And without spoilers, what do you think the transition is?
A more mature, stark look at what this slice of life is. I think...
Stark in terms of like something more existential, or...
Yeah, the show is able to take more risks at this point. And the premise was already risky. Let's not take anything away from seasons 1 and 2, right? The show was already a gamble. But this show is now cemented into the American culture by season 3. David Chase, I imagine at this point, HBO must be like, okay, yeah, you do it, you do your thing. We're gonna just sit back here and
he's
collect
Ace
all the
Rothstein.
money.
He's the money machine.
Yeah,
do what
exactly.
you want to do. Yeah.
So I feel like this is really them. And also the idea that they didn't know in season 1, especially, if this was going to catch on or there was going to be more of it. So the reason 3 feels in some ways like a transitional season, even though there is a beginning, middle, and end. It's just not as clean in that way as the first 2 were, right? There is this sense to me that there's an acknowledgement, okay, we're in this for the long haul. HBO would have this go forever if they could.
Sure.
So in the grand scheme, what is the story we're telling here? What pieces do we need to set? That said, the highs of this season are so impactful and so brutal. So, look, if you were to show somebody, again, no spoilers on specifics, but if you were to show somebody season 1 who had never seen The Sopranos, and then show them season 6, visually, tonally, it's 2 different shows almost. They don't feel like the same thing.
Sure.
3 begins the process of taking it from its... And that's because the people involved are artists, and they grow, and things change, and people's moods change, the world changed. We're going to talk today about how 3 is the last pre-9/11 season, and then when we record our season 4 episodes, we're going to talk about how that might have changed some of the cynicism underneath the show. And this is also, at its core, a show about America, and 9/11 is a very pivotal thing that happened dead smack in the middle of this thing. So it's all over it. So that's my take on season 3. That said, I agree with everything you guys said. It's an amazing piece of work. I think they recovered from the Marchand death. Not only recovered, but teed up another way to go and knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Nancy Marchand, she dies, and we did criticize the now dated and awful CGI Livia head.
It's still bad.
Yeah. I get why they felt maybe they should do it, but it was a miss. That was a miss.
We got some fan mail. I should say we got some hate mail about how much, I think in particular, I complained about Proshai Lavushka as an episode, but also especially the CGI. listen, I can't help it. I don't think it makes it a bad episode. I think that's a wonderful episode. I just, it's a wild pitch. You know, that 1-2 punch of Ruggerio's and Proshai Lavushka's is off. That CGI seems real bad. No one can really convince me otherwise. And it's like maybe the show's one misstep. Like, okay, I'm over it, is what I'm saying. We don't have to dwell. I apologize if I offended anybody. It's a really good episode. I was just really bummed out by that. But you know what? I wasn't bummed by, like, the show. I was bummed because it makes me think of things in my own life that are unpleasant. And, you know, I feel bad that this woman died. Nancy Marchand. Yeah. And I accept this was the best way they thought to handle it, and it's fine. It is what it is. It
brings the real question to the table, which is if a podcast host apologizes, not on Twitter, was it really an apology?
No, and I'm still canceled. Actually, I'm canceled, and I can't get a job anywhere.
Damn it.
We'll put Jordan's voice in through CGI.
Right.
And it'll be really, really bad.
Thank you.
So yeah, what would this season... How do you think the season would have been different if Nancy Marchand was still around? I know that's pointless to speculate. I know David Chase has mentioned that there was talk of her being a witness, and that would have probably been a major thrust of the whole season. Supposedly, some kind of reconciliation might have been on the table.
We're all writers, so I think we can see the hallmarks of like where she might have been used otherwise, right? I agree with Paul. I think, you know, the Gloria Trillo plotline probably only comes about because of Nancy Marchand's passing. I don't think you bring back Janice this early. She had such a good exit in 2, and she comes back so soon in season 3. And it's like we're trying to basically... I nothing against the show. Nancy Marchand is such a huge presence. Like, that Livia as a character is such a huge presence. You can't recreate her. The best you can do is sort of recreate her in the aggregate, right? Sort of like put in a bunch of different characters that are all going to make up the essence of her. And they do an amazing job.
Yeah.
Janice is still really great in this season. Gloria's the fucking best, arguably one of the best things in the season. It's like her and Melfi for me. You know, it's you know, they did a great job. I think probably... I don't know where the Livia character would end up, but I think Tony has to show down with her.
Yeah.
I think he has to meet his real enemy and move through that, you know, maybe in a more crafted version of her death, where she gets to really say something to him at the end.
Yeah.
Really say something.
It would be a different, wholly different show, in my opinion, if that happened.
It really would. It's a little, I think also as a writer, it can be a bit hard for me to conceive of it, because it would have been a challenge, not that it's one that they couldn't have met, but I think it would have been a challenge to not repeat themselves. What happens when Nancy Marchand died and Livia dies is, yes, she's dead, but... And I'm going to stay away from spoilers, but I mean, people lose parents, and it's not over, even when Tony thinks it's over in the therapy session. And
so she's dead, right? We're probably done here.
Yeah. People go on years and years. I had a talk with my mother once about her mother being dead 20 years, but things still come back to her, and that's with a mother that she got along with fairly well. Yeah. So this is going to stay with Tony. It's just, and the form that it takes in this season, I thought was particularly effective. In terms of the overall question that Chris brought up about the show's existentialism and digging into some of these questions, I do think it was a big step, and I think the show has gotten better and better as it's gone on. I don't think it was in any way bad or failing in like the first season, but the humor I just think has gotten better. The humor in the first season is like, who's pussy? My pussy, your pussy. It's good. These jokes are better. We know the characters more. I think the writers have gotten more confident as it's gone on.
And there's a shorthand with the audience once you've been around for a little while.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we mean when we say maturing. Not that the first 2 seasons are immature in a juvenile sense, but maturing in the sense that there becomes a language. A story is told in a way that it becomes its own language. It's like you put somebody in an audience for a Shakespeare show that has never seen Shakespeare or studied Shakespeare. First 10 minutes, like, what the fuck is going on? But eventually, if it's done right, you start to piece it and you start to understand it, and it becomes something. So a story is told in its own language, and I think that's what I mean when I say the show matures in this season in a way that is interesting, is that the shorthand is there. You get how this world works. You get who these people are. Now where are they going?
Yeah.
With that said, where are we going? I think it's time we should kick off with one of our top 3s.
Top 3! Oh, yeah! It's a top 3. Oh, yeah.
Oh, rim shot.
That was uncanny. That was better than the Livia CGI.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Top 3 music cues. And before we get into this quickly, folks, I do want to mention, and we fucked this up on our Season 2 retrospective.
We always fucking...
But I am determined to make it work this time. As
not gonna work.
As the executive producer of this podcast, I'm going to make sure this structure works.
Okay.
Because we don't want to talk about our choices with each other ahead of time, because that keeps the podcast spontaneous and exciting when we talk about our top 3 moments.
Right.
So what ends up happening...
To be clear, is we have not shared this with each other.
We don't talk about this with each other. We make our own private lists and say it to each other for the first time because it keeps it fun and exciting.
Right.
But that said, what ends up happening is you get this thing where somebody's number 3 moment is another person's number 1 moment, and you blow it before you get to it, and the person who has it as number 1 has probably more to say about it than if you have it as your number 3, and it jumbles it. So what we're going to do this time is, and I said we were going to do this last time, but we didn't.
All right.
But we're going to do it this time, and I will be the structure Nazi here.
Yes.
We are going to go one by one, give our choices with no explanation behind the choice, and then talk about them.
Okay.
That way, if there's any overlap, we can cover it all in one conversation. Right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So...
This is with no prep.
No prep at all.
No prep. And listeners, before the show, we do a pre-show, but all we do is we each take out our balls, and we show each other our balls, and that's the only prep we do.
Hey, that's
now
it.
we have that on record now.
It's on record.
Okay.
But
I'm not cutting.
When I'm looking at Jordan and Chris's balls, I get excited. So it's
Paul does get excited. That's true.
It takes a minute.
Don't you dare cut this out.
I will not cut this out.
No.
You've sunk your own ship. Hey, listen, I don't have a job in a public school.
They don't care.
Good. So, top 3 music. Do we want to go 3-3-3-2-2-2, or do we want to go 3-2-1, 3-2-1, 3-2-1? How do we want to do this?
Do we all... Oh, I don't know. Wait, what do you mean?
I mean, like, do I give my 3, Jordan gives his 3, Paul gives his 3, then we go to 2? Or does we go by person? I'll give my top 3, you give your top 3, Paul gives his.
I like if we all do, like, our third choice. I think is fun.
Great.
Cool.
So, I'll start with my 3.
And this is no explanations. We're all
no
going around. This
explanations.
is number 3.
We're going to announce our choices.
Okay, because we'll probably double up a little bit.
Then we will discuss.
Music cues.
Music cues.
Music cues.
I do have an honorable mention. Some of these I have honorable mentions. Some of them I do not. For honorable mention, I want to cite "The Captain" by Casey Chambers, used in the end of episode 8. He is risen.
Mm-hmm. It's in the beginning of that episode as well, I think, right?
Is it? It might be.
Maybe.
I know it's definitely at the end.
Okay.
But my number 3 for music moments and cues is "Core Ingrata."
Ooh.
As performed by Dominic Chianese in the finale Army of One.
My number 3, Ghost Riders in the Sky, using the casino scene of He Is Risen.
Ooh, okay. Mm-hmm. All right. We'll come back. All right, quick honorable mentions. I got a couple. One is called Gloria by the Belfast Gypsies, which is just a cool pull from an Irish band that David Chase obviously listened to. Plays in the beginning of Pine Barrens. Other honorable mention, Where's the Money, Where's the Dough, from the end of Fortunate Son. Number 3 music cue is No Music Cue at the end of Employee of the Month.
Very nice.
I like that. Your favorite one is an absence of music. That's cool.
That is cool.
That's cool. My number 2 is the Peter Gunn theme / I'll Be Watching You combination used in Mr. Ruggiero's Neighborhood.
My number 2 is Sad-Eyed Lady of a Lowlife by A3, which opens Mr. Ruggiero's Neighborhood.
Nice. Number 2, Living on a Thin Line by the Kinks. Played 3 times. Top, middle, and...
How the fuck did I miss that on my
That's
list?
that's a good one. I missed that too.
My number 1, Sposa son disprezzata. It's a song used twice in the season. Once to take us out of Pine Barrens, and 2 to take us into Amor Fou.
I think it's the only time they did that.
Right.
My number 1, Sister Golden Hair by America, used in Another Toothpick.
My number 1 is Return to Me, Bob Dylan, the end of Amor Fou.
Very nice.
So we don't have any double ups here.
No
That's very
doubles.
exciting.
That's
which
crazy. I don't think
really
that's ever
nice.
happened to us
That
before.
actually, these lists speak to how fucking awesome and variegated the music cues are.
Yeah.
I picked 3 instead of like a top 5, folks, for a reason. And it's because it's always very hard to narrow it down to just 3.
Yeah.
But what inevitably ends up happening is it allows us to bring up so many different moments in the show in combination. So we have 9 different things that we just mentioned here, and any one of them are valid in a top 3, in my opinion. I didn't hear one of those and go, are you kidding me? So, yeah, anything you want to talk about on these? I just thought the use of the Captain song, which was my number 3, was clever for that particular episode. It works in both ways. They're on a boat, but it was also the episode where Ralphie became the captain, and the lyrics work. And it made a song that I would never listen to on my own, just as a personal music taste, something that I listen to and think about The Sopranos. And so music is a category for us on this because it's so important to the show, in much the way that food is. David Chase has such an eclectic knowledge of music because he personally picks any music that appears on the show. I mean, my God. You just, like, 1 minute you're listening to Deep Purple, and the next minute it's, Janice is listening to Ambrosius Sanders yodeling. It's like, what the fuck? Craziness.
Yeah. My number 3 was Ghost Riders in the Sky from He Has Risen. It's more of a moment. The track is not really easy to hear in this scene. This is, of course, there's been some building animosity between Tony and Ralphie. Of course, University has already happened, so it's already exploded. Things are boiling over. And the first time they really get back together is they happen to run into each other at the casino, and this is where Ralphie refuses the drink.
Yeah.
Right, in that casino scene. And it's just a really cool parallel. We get a lot of parallels in this show between gangsters and cowboys. These are the two people that have been set to oppose each other. Ghost Riders in the Sky famously is almost always used in Western films to be like, oh, we're riding to the final showdown, and someone's gonna die. And this speaks to just the wonderful anticipation play that is season 3, is that these two don't really get a showdown yet, but it's already stirring. And those stirring chords of Ghost Rider is really, really cool.
So for 3, I picked the No Q from End of Employee of the Month because it's such an effective moment. It's powerful. I think it's partly unexpected when Melfi just says no, and it respects this kind of omerta that she has. And it, in some ways, I don't know, playing music at the end of that episode would almost feel like a lazy choice or something. So that silence that sits over, that clouds over the ending credits is just so effective. I wanted to give it a shout out. So in this category, I thought it was an interesting space for it.
I made a whoopsie. I talked about the Captain, which was my runner-up, but Corte Ingrata, I don't have much of an explanation for, except it's Dominic Chianese doing a beautiful job with a classic Italian ballad in an impactful moment memorable moment at the end of the season.
Sure.
We talked about, when we recorded that episode, maybe not loving or understanding fully the choice of having multiple songs layered on top of it to take us into the credits, but Junior himself singing it was moving and good, and I love Dominic Chianese. That's what that's about. My number 2, the Peter Gunn theme, I'll Be Watching You. That's just cool. It worked for that episode. It kind of gave like the Peter Gunn theme. You associate it with cops and detectives and the spying element of it, and then you tie that in with the song about stalking. It adds a creepiness to it. These guys are creeps. They're staring at Adriana and ogling her underwear.
Horrible. Yeah.
How green was my fucking valley. Yeah. So it worked on that level, and it's a cool mashup. A lot of times, I've taken a lot of people through The Sopranos, and when they get what's being done with that music cue, they always are like, oh, that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
How they combine those. So nice job, Sopranos. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, my number 2 was Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlife, which is a song by A3, also known as Alabama 3, I guess. And this is a song that we hear briefly. It opens the season. It opens Mr. Ruggerio's neighborhood. It plays as Tony is walking down to pick up the paper. And it's got a really cool, kind of like it's just a kind of like a weird grungy sound to it. It's not like a sound that you associate with the show. So it already kind of sets you off. And also just the lyrics to that song are really, really good. I mean, it's so much of this season will speak to the lyrics that are in this song. The sad-eyed lady of the lowlife. You're the girl that's with the bad guy, right? How many of those are there in this season, right? Just a little bit of the lyrics here. Sad-eyed lady of the lowlife, come on, burn a while with me. Put the high life on the bonfire, baby. Let's go steal some gasoline. I mean, speaking to so much that will happen, particularly later in the season, but the danger that is for these women in the lives of these men.
Well said.
Indeed.
Alabama 3, of course, as many people know, did do the main theme of the show, Just woke up.
Oh, is that true?
That woke up this morning is in Alabama 3.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. Wow.
Yeah. So they are deeply entrenched in...
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
And
Damn.
speaking of the danger that they pose to young women, my number 2 is Living on a Thin Line.
Oh,
From University.
Kinks, great band.
Great band, great sound. It's perfect. The Sopranos actually doesn't do this as much. This is what's... people might not care about this kind of detail, but diegetic versus non-diegetic sound. Diegetic is naturally occurring sound. Non-diegetic sound is when you play something over the soundtrack. All three instances of Living on a Thin Line are diegetic. It is playing in the club. It is playing in the bada bing, which is so great because it is credibly a song that I would hear at a strip club. The lyrics, like what Jordan was just discussing, also reflect this ethos and this world and what the rules are and how you can't get out of it. And again, the precariousness of it, hence Living on a Thin Line. I just love the use of it. It's got the scope of it. It's got the drama, the tragedy as well. It's a perfect choice.
So well said.
Paul, I zoned out for a second. Did you say you're diabetic?
I did.
Okay, good. No, excellently said. Very well articulated. And Sposa son disprezzata. I love it because they use it in a cool way. I don't think they did this before, and I'm not 100% positive they do it ever again, where the same song that takes you out of an episode brings you into the next episode. I thought that was really clever usage because it plays while Paulie is staring at the Pine Barrens as they're driving out, just this snowy, stark landscape, then pauses for this little addendum scene they have at the end of Pine Barrens with Tony and Melfi, and it's an eerie sounding aria. It's a lonely and cold sounding aria, and it takes us into the museum at the beginning of Amor Fou, so it carries that same energy.
Yeah.
It very much, you could watch these back to back in one sitting, and it works. And I think it's such a great use of that aria, that tune. And it's also something that could conceivably be playing in a museum like that, too. So it works on a practical level as well. I just liked it. I thought it was a cool stylistic choice on the part of the directors of those 2 episodes and David Chase. So, good job, Sopranos. I liked it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think that's a beautiful choice. My number 1 is Sister Golden Hair by America. This, of course, plays after Bobby Bacala Sr., played by Burt Young, has successfully completed the hit he's been assigned, but also dies shortly thereafter. He's asphyxiating. He, of course, has lung cancer or, I guess, severe emphysema. And he can't get to his inhaler in time. He crashes his car. He dies tragically. But it's that whole sequence is amazing. It's one of my favorite sequences in the whole season. Is the sequence from him arriving at the hit, performing at the hit, and then driving away from the hit. I think is so good. Burt Young is one of my favorite one-offs this season. I think he just did an amazing job. He's a great actor. He's like a cool legendary guy that you could bring in to do one episode. It's so cool. I thought just like a great ending for him, but particularly the use of that song. Sister Golden Hair, of course, is a song about ruminating on the girl that you kind of can't get in touch with anymore, and your best days being behind you, but you always think about them anyway, you know? And to me, that final car ride, it could be interpreted multiple ways, but it seems to me to be so sad, but also very much victorious, right? I am useful again. I've completed a hit. I'm awesome. I'm smoking cigarettes, and fuck the cancer that I have. I'm going to smoke them anyway. And I'm going to die like a gangster. And that's pretty cool.
We talked about it when we recorded the episode. As far as gangster exits from this earth go,
yeah, pretty good.
Doesn't get much cooler than that, actually,
yeah.
in a way.
And the guys he kills, are pieces of fucking shit. So, you, feel really good about this character, you know?
Yeah.
And considering, ways you could die in this world,
yes,
really cool. He went out well.
Well said. So, Return to Me, the Bob Dylan cover, plays over the end of Amor Fou with the 3 guys coming back to their wives. Chris, we've talked about how much we like this sequence.
Yeah.
And I love the use of music for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's such a classic tune. Something about Bob Dylan's Grady voice singing it has a nice vibe. I love that it's a callback to the classic Dean Martin Italian guy version, which is briefly playing earlier in the episode. So I love when the theme loops around. And it's just, again, like a playful, fun and even funny take on these various situations that are filled with lies and obfuscation and hypocrisy. So it makes for a really powerful impact of that ending to one of my favorite episodes of the show, if not my favorite, Amour Fou. So that's why I chose it.
Well done. And with that is top 3 music cues. I love that we all didn't pick any overlap. I like that. I hope that
bodes well for the rest of this episode. I think. Though I don't mind when we overlap.
No, not at all. Well, that also speaks to the effectiveness of whichever ones get picked multiple times. So, pivot here for a second. We're going to talk about top 3 characters and performances, but one of the rules for our top 3 characters and performances category is we exclude Tony.
Correct. Tony's never included, yeah.
He's so powerful a character. It is his show. It's hard. He would be on the list every time. But that's it. Let's talk about Tony here and his journey through this season. Tony's larger thematic role in each season is changing. First season, we discussed Tony as son, a surrogate son to Junior, a son to Livia, and that being the central conceit of the action. In season 2, it's Tony as brother to Big Pussy, brother to Janice, and how that deals with the trouble that brews in that season. Season 3 centers on the idea of Tony as parent. Tony as a parent to Jackie, a mentor for Jackie, and also to his 2 kids. This is definitely the biggest presence of the children since the show started is season 3. They both got a lot going on. First half is a lot of Meadow with the situation with Noah, her starting college, and the back half is more AJ, his behavioral problems, his anxiety attacks, and Tony wrestling with the fact that his kids are becoming adults. He doesn't know how this is all going to go and whether he's going to succeed. And it's a struggle for the soul of his children. And based on what happens with Jackie, he might not like the results he gets. And he's nervous about that, and it's catching up with him. So thoughts on Tony as a parent. And we can rope this into a discussion about Jackie because it's very relevant too. So let's talk about Tony with AJ, Meadow, Jackie, and the fight for the soul of these people he's supposed to be looking out for and caring for.
My inclination is first to comment that I think Tony as a parent is largely a failure in this season.
Certainly to Jackie. Abject failure to Jackie. It's not that he didn't try.
I think it's across the board. If we want to briefly touch down, so I'll start with Christopher. Christopher gets made this season, and that's like his big thing is like trying to live life as a made man. But Tony doesn't really do much mentorship of Christopher and largely butts heads with Christopher in this season and doesn't really help him to be a better made guy and kind of like pawns him off on Paulie, who's a terrible role model. So not good.
His advice to Chris when he comes to Tony, which is what he was told to do during his making ceremony, you have any problems, you just got to talk to this guy. And Tony's answer is basically, suck it up.
Right.
Go back to being abused and strip searched. And...
Right. Not particularly good. Tony is not great with Meadow and obviously horrible to Noah, even though Noah sucks. So not good there. Carmela bails him out of that one, basically, and then it obviously fizzles out on its own. Tony with AJ is a disaster. It's almost the worst one, except the fact that we have Jackie Jr. this season. They have no mission for AJ to succeed in life. We have talked so much this season about how this kid has no future that is good for him, about how he doesn't understand the nature of consequences, about how he doesn't understand how things are earned in this life or what he wants for himself, and they actually go as far as to like get him in that military school uniform, which triggers a fucking panic attack. It's a disaster. It's the worst parenting on the show, except for the fact that we also have Jackie Jr., who's looking for someone to be a father to him, and Tony really refuses to help him and indirectly causes his death. It's really bad. It's about as bad as it gets.
Couldn't put it much better myself. I think that, I guess the only thing that I would add is that, again, maybe adding to the show's mystique. This isn't just about gangsters, but it's about America. It's like, aren't gangsters funny? Well, isn't the human condition funny? Something that is changing now, I think, for the better, but is not true of the last couple of generations, certainly among parochial Italians, Carmela does the domestic work in this house, which includes tending to the children. So another factor about Tony's parenting is that it's on and off. He's always talking about when I come home and what kind of house do I come back to. It's like, well, shit's been humming along when you've been out doing business. So he's always checking in and sometimes doesn't like what he sees. But again, if a character on The Sopranos is being confronted with how much they have committed to something, are they going to then fully commit, or are they going to figure out which way to half commit? I think it's usually the second one. So there's that. Second, again, much more specific to the characters, how do you square your life with what you want for your kids? Tony does not want this for his kids. He doesn't want them near this. That was even true of Jackie. And part of the brick wall that he ran into with Jackie was literally being a mentor, a role model, and saying, don't be like me. Which just didn't work. And in a similar way, even though it's not as outright stated, I think it's a similar trouble with AJ. Except AJ is younger and might even be more wayward. Just having a lot of trouble finding a place. So it's a complicated set of issues. And actually the most complicated might be the one with Meadow, because she's the hardest one to fool. That's the complication that comes up in Army of One. You can't just bullshit her. And it's gonna carry the show forward. So yeah, I think that it's a lot of failure, but also, as in what we mentioned already about season 3, it's up in the air. When season 3 ends, Meadow's gone back to school. We're not sure where that's going. I think there was even some uneasiness about the fact that Tony pulls AJ in close. Remember when they're listening to the music and Jordan said, "That's not where AJ needs to be." He's pulling him in close. It's like, shouldn't he should like get away?
Yeah.
So it leaves me kind of feeling like rough. I want to see where it goes next. I'm not just feeling like completely defeated, but it does feel like pretty bleak. Tony's performance as a dad, not great. No. Not great.
Was Jackie, from the point Tony got him, because let's look at Jackie Jr.'s journey for a moment. Not a character we see in season 1, but we get his dad, Jackie. And we get a little bit of a sense, somewhat, of who he is. And a little bit more embellishment in the episode To Save Us All from Satan's Power. We get to see a little bit more of that. So, that's his situation. Jackie and Rosalie, what we know about them. Then the next time we encounter Jackie Jr. in our story, chronologically, he's under Richie's arm in season 2. Just at the very tail end of season 2, he's palling around with Richie. Not a great start. Then Richie disappears. Tony pulls him in a little bit, tells him, listen, this hurt all of us. Your uncle was a rat, and this is not for you. Your dad didn't want this for you. Stay on the straight and narrow. Is he in school? Is he in med school? Is he flunking out? What's going on there? So, from the moment Tony gets his hands on Jackie, from that point, is it salvageable? Look at the pivot points and the decision moments. What could Tony have done differently to have steered Jackie away from this? Was Jackie already too far gone, I guess is my question. Was it more about managing a lost cause, or did Tony really miss good opportunities to turn this kid around?
I think the latter. I think Jackie was very, very savable, and I think that makes it more tragic. Mm-hmm. I think no one really listens to Jackie. I know Meadow is kind of a whiny person, but she says some things that are really valid. Like, he needed somebody that was really going to listen to him and help him. You know what I mean? And no one really does that at any point. Like, when Tony tries to guide him, it's in this, like, very still sort of dismissive way. Don't be like me, stay on the straight and narrow. But there's no hand-holding. There's no guiding him along that path. You know, if anyone spent even an hour with Jackie Jr., 60 minutes, they would find out he's not a good candidate for Rutgers. He doesn't have the mind for medical school, but he can do other things. Okay, he wants to maybe have a career in fashion. What's wrong with that? Help him to do that. Or help him to have another job where he feels valued. Help him to see that the mob life is not a good life for him for a specific reason. Do you know what I mean? Don't just be like, just don't do this. Do you know what I mean? It's just there's not enough of an explanation for him to show him why it's a bad idea. I don't know. I think Tony gives him nothing but, like, tough love, and then it's even worse when he's dating Meadow. It's just no one really stops to be like, listen, this is why you can't do this, because you're going to end up dead. You know, he just thinks it's because they don't want him around or because it's not what his father wanted. But it's actually a lot worse than that. He's not cut out for this.
When you lie all the time, as these characters do, and I'm noticing this with some more recent episodes as well, it's hard because it's so funny that I actually feel for the characters when they lie in some way. Because then what happens when, as Jordan has just posited, you come into this situation where a kid really needs you to be straight up with them. They need you to just tell them what's going on, tell them the truth, give them the straight dope. I think characters like Tony, they even think they're telling the full truth when they're not. Because when you lie this much, you delude other people and you delude yourself. So a lot of them are coming to this saying, oh yeah, I'm going to help Jackie Jr., but they give him some, again, like something that's sort of bland advice. It could be just by rote, and it doesn't do much. So of course, and even Jackie being dumb knows enough to know where the lies are and what they are and why they're formulated because people have been lying to him forever.
Tony also needs to have some grace that he does not have where he needed to realize, okay, things did not work out with my daughter and Jackie, and I'm angry about that, but I still need to help him on the road to something better. He needed to care about both of them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he couldn't do that. He couldn't separate, like, oh, you fucked around on my daughter and I hate you now and you're a fucking bastard, whatever. But he couldn't separate that from, like, okay, but you're still my best friend's son and I have to figure out something for you. Even though I don't like you right now, I have to make sure that you're not going to be in danger. And he didn't figure that out, and that is on Tony.
Yeah. And the hypocrisy. The kids see the hypocrisy. Jackie sees it. He's not the smartest. He's probably the stupidest of the three kids, quote unquote, that Tony is caring for in this season. But Tony says to him, what are you doing here? When he spots him at the casino. And Jackie's response is correct. You're here.
Yeah.
The episode, Tony's walking around with a gun. In the same episode, he takes the gun away from Jackie and kicks him for it. The same gun, the 38. It's like, he sees this. He has eyes and ears. He's not like mentally disabled. He's watching this hypocrisy in real time. And Tony's supposed to be this role model for him. And when he mimics that, he just gets lectured. And the lectures are meaningless. Because he's modeling off of what he sees and what he knows and what he wants to be. But Tony is just not able to grasp that because that would involve diving in on his own behavior. And these guys have to constantly lie and deflect and lie to themselves and lie to each other.
Yeah.
Good point. Mm-hmm. Tony is in denial about all three kids, I think, at some level that we've covered Jackie. With AJ, he's very dismissive of any approach that he sees as too soft, including the kid needs to talk to a therapist. He's dismissive of that. In spite of the fact that he talks to a therapist, Tony doesn't like that for other people. Mm-mm. He doesn't like. He's very down on it. It's a weird thing, and because he can then keep it, and he also keeps his own therapy a tightly guarded secret. Similarly with Meadow, I remember last season. I think the episode is Full Leather Jacket. Carmela is dealing with the fact that Meadow's going off to school, and there's going to be, at least at some level, some form of separation. And I watched that episode, I was like, Tony's not dealing with this, and he's not ready for it. So sure enough, Meadow brings a half-black, half-Jewish kid back to the house to, watch a movie, and Tony fucking freaks out. Because he has done none of this work about the daughter is going to separate from you, as all kids do. Just as all kids rebel. So no, Tony, part of it is that he's not prepared for any of this.
Not a good time for the April family. Just a really rough. I feel, but by the end of season 3, I feel most bad for Rosalie. You want to give her some shit as a parent, but what chance did she have with this? There's only so much you can do, and Jackie, of course, but Rosalie is just in such a shitty spot by the end of the season, and the fall of the April family is not glamorous. It's not pretty. It's rough.
I almost feel like the April family sort of reminds me of the Polonius family in Hamlet, where it's just their fates are tied to Hamlet's family, and they're dying on the vine because things in Hamlet's family are so toxic. It kind of destroys this family, just sort of as a side effect. And you're just watching that in slow motion between Jackie Jr., Rosalie, Richie, anybody with the April last name is just fucked the longer they hang around The Sopranos.
Mm.
Yeah, in the last sequence at the restaurant, Junior and Tony talk briefly, and that is seen as a harbinger of the downfall of this whole thing. It's like, oh, if Jackie were still alive and his kid had died, would have had a line around the block. Now, so it's kind of got this grim quality of the whole affair coming apart.
Anything else to say about Jackie?
He's always a dumb fuck.
Did he almost drown in like 3 inches of water? The penguin exhibit.
Well done. Good high five, James. Very nice.
Kid was always a dumb fuck. Well, I think it's time for another top 3. I'm hungry for it.
Top 3! Yeah.
Drum solo.
Ooh, a drum solo.
We've never had a drum solo before, I don't think.
It's amazing how we're still managing to...
The budget on this show has gotten out of hand.
I'm hungry for it. Let's do some food moments.
Oh, yes.
These are moments that are either centered around or about food, or we even qualify moments that happen while food is present. It doesn't necessarily have to be about the food, but that's the idea. And we're going to stick to our format. Jordan, would you like to start us this time?
I will. Okay, so we're going to do food moments. So I'm going to go with my number 3 without explanation, correct?
Yes.
Number 3, no explanation, are ketchup packets and Tic Tacs, Pine Barrens.
My turn?
Yeah.
All right. A few food moments, few honorable mentions. One is mix it with the relish, the packets and everything from Pine Barrens.
Yep.
The Whitman sampler from Another Toothpick that they bring to the guy.
Very good.
Rosalie's tiramisu in University, in that dinner where you see the hypocrisy of the guys, just looks good. Almost time for turkey sandwiches! And He Is Risen. And the last and my favorite of the honorable mentions is Ralphie shows Jackie the butter trick in Telltale Mozzarella. The bit with making pasta. It's the one good bit of advice that Jackie probably gets this season. Number 3, take your fucking dinner. Pine Barrens. Gloria throws the London broil at Tony's head.
That's my number 1.
All right.
Okay.
We'll discuss that then. Number 3 for me, and this might not technically qualify, but I'm going to make it qualify, and I'll explain it when I explain why. But Carmela taking shots during Pro Lavushka.
Yeah.
My number 2 is from the Telltale Mozzarella. It is AJ Soprano's custom order on a pizza, which, according to this, is a double meatball, pepperoni, sausage, peppers, onions, extra mozzarella.
Ooh.
A pizza never hurt nobody.
I'm going to show this to Jordan. He sees the evidence. That is also my number 2. My pizza never hurt nobody.
Yeah.
Telltale Mozzarella.
My number 2 food moment, Thanksgiving dinner, He Is Risen.
Mm-hmm.
The whole...
And of course, already mentioned, my number 1 food moment would be the side of beef for that beautiful steak that is hurled at the head of Tony Soprano in Pine Barrens by Gloria Trello.
My number 1 is 4 Stitches, Ruined Dinner. The flashback in Fortunate Son episode 3 where Tony passes out.
Holy shit, how did that not get on anyone else's list? That's
Wait, which one?
Huge moment.
4 Stitches, Ruined Dinner. The flashback in Fortunate Son.
Satrial, the meat.
Yes. Wow.
I'm embarrassed because I might have put that on my list. I don't know how that one escaped me. But I'm not mad about my number 1 either. Number 1, Ralphie's apology in He Is Risen. Tony's having his meal.
Oh, yes.
And Ralphie has to come into the empty Vesuvio and apologize.
Yeah. I had an honorable mention that I should have led with. I apologize. I just see it now. Uncle Ben's rice and gabagool. Of course, from Proshai Lavushka.
This is an embarrassment of riches, the food moments of this season.
Yeah.
Yeah, in abundance. So, let's go around with our number 3.
Yeah, let's start with one, because one of ours was shared with an honorable mention and my number 3, which was ketchup packets and Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
And your mix it with the relish is the same moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Pine Barrens is one of the best episodes in, I guess, the series, but certainly
And it's
in
a
this
big fan
season.
favorite, too.
Big fan favorite. That is such a funny moment, and it's a very funny food-centered moment. I think I've never enjoyed Christopher and Polly more than I have in this episode. Their relationship has been so unique and uniquely conflicted in this season that this is a nice diffusion of their whole situation. Being trapped in this survival situation together, it's played for laughs.
Yep.
And things kind of work out for them after this.
Yep. It's so, as you guys said, it's a favorite. It's so quotable. At one point, I think Paulie says, "What's your plan? Sit here and eat ketchup packs?" It's so funny the way they do it. Also, what's funny is how hungry they are because before they did this, they didn't eat. And what they're talking about is possibly going to Morton's and getting a steak.
Yeah, they talk about really delicious food. Roy Rogers, too.
Right. So possibly getting a steak, which Tony then has to forego to go get them out of the woods.
Yep.
And Gloria throws the steak at him, which we're going to talk about too.
Yep.
Yeah,
That was my 3. Yep.
Yeah. And your 3, Paul, was...
My 3, maybe I should wait on because it's Jordan's number 1. We'll talk about it.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. My number 3 was Carmela doing shots at Livia's wake because of what it leads to.
That's fucking awesome.
That's
Chris.
one of my favorite moments in that episode. And I'll say it counts because it happens while Artie is preparing to serve dessert. So it's technically food is involved. They're at a funeral. There's a big array out. Artie is catering, so it fucking counts. Carmela, while all this scene is going on and you're getting these very forced bullshit responses from people about Livia who have been forced into this quote-unquote California bullshit, as Tony calls it, when Janice mentioned the idea of people sharing the remembrance of Ma. And every so often we're cutting around while whoever is talking, and we're seeing the polite, withdrawn responses from the guests. And Carmela must take 4 or 5 shots of pure alcohol, wondering if she should say something. And you can see it. And there's so much going on with her in those little moments, just tossing back a shot, tossing back a shot, tossing back a shot. And eventually she sets a glass down. This is such a crock of shit. Right before Artie is going to open his mouth about the nonsense,
Right,
of,
the
with the
Vesuvio
fire
stuff. Yeah.
and just goes on one of the most epic rants about Livia and the climax of that episode, which is, this is your legacy. This is what you've left behind, Livia. This ruin, this misery, and it gets Hugh fired up. I don't know how many goddamn Christmases I don't want to begin to count.
One of the great Hugh scenes.
Who are you, the Minister of Propaganda? Excellent. From
Excellent.
beyond the grave, even.
This is my house.
Yeah. So Carmela just owns it, and I counted it because I love that moment.
Yeah.
In an otherwise very dark episode.
Great.
And probably the best scene from that episode, really.
Sure.
Yeah.
They did a cool thing too, at least once with it, where she would down the shot before they would cut to maybe outside when Artie's throwing stuff away. So it builds that tension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, how incredibly high Christopher and Adriana are during that entire sequence is amazing. My number 2 was, in fact, the mozzarella. It was the pizza from the Telltale mozzarella, right? So this order, which sounds delicious, again, is a double meatball pepperoni sausage, peppers, onions, extra mozzarella. My pizza never hurt nobody.
Yeah.
Very funny. Also, I just love that pizza order. I love that is how they get caught. I think that title, some would say too cute by half. I actually think it's just right. I think it's really fun.
I agree. I also chose it, and I think it's different. There are these different food moments, some about what's happening in the scene, some about how, in the case of Tony and Ralphie and the apology, how you situate an apology. Here, it's telling the story, as Jordan said, with the pizza, because it's the Telltale mozzarella, it's the order that gives up AJ. And it's just, the scene is obviously so fun. I love the dialogue. I love the way it's shot.
Yep.
Everything about it. It's so playful and fun.
Yeah. And Lady Gaga.
Yep. Lady Gaga.
The Lady Gaga.
The Lady Gaga, she appears.
My number 2 is Thanksgiving dinner in He Is Risen. For a couple reasons. One, the food just looks great. I want to be at the Soprano Thanksgiving someday. And
Not the April Thanksgiving?
that was sad. But yeah, they did a great job of presenting it. You felt for those 10 minutes that you were in their house. The football's on. They're all hanging out watching the game. So, and the food itself just looked terrific. So that's why one of the reasons why the moment is. I'm also a shameless Aaron Arkaway fan. That character is hilarious to me. Janice's narcoleptic, born-again Christian lover / music partner. And because we were at that Thanksgiving dinner as the audience, we were privy to Jackie Aprile coming in to ask Meadow out on a date. And have you heard the good news? He is risen.
He is
Dead
risen.
serious delivery. Awkward silence. And then, of course, almost time for turkey sandwiches. Throwing a fucking grape at him, waking him up. Tony having fun. You felt it. You felt like you were at that dinner. You know what it feels like to be in a big environment like that for Thanksgiving. And it just brought you, it sucked you in. And I appreciated being sucked into the Soprano Thanksgiving dinner for 10 minutes it took in that episode.
Sure. And then my number 1, which I also share with, I think, Paul's number 3, is this correct? Is the steak that is thrown at Tony's head by Gloria Trillo in Pine Barrens. It almost made like one of my most memorable moments of the season as well. I just like, it is the thing that really makes Tony realize that this needs to end, that this is a dangerous situation. And because of the show's relationship with food, that is the language that's being used to communicate that, right? Because remember, it's not just funny that she's throwing a steak at his head. Meat has a significant role on this show, the symbol of meat, of food, of what happens with sex and food and your mother and your lover, and all that being tied together psychologically as this thing is literally hurled at Tony's head.
It's also a huge side of beef that Johnny Boy is carving into when Tony passes out.
Exactly right. Also, Sopranos fun fact that I think we mentioned on the show is that the director of Pine Barrens, Steve Buscemi, is the one that actually throws the side of beef at Tony's head.
Right. It was one of those deals. Actors have this problem. You hear about this a lot.
Yeah.
We have to like throw water in somebody's face or throw something at somebody, and you miss several times. Right. So I think Steve Buscemi had to just take it and chuck it. That's so the story goes. I love that.
Yeah, but a great moment, and in particular, not to take anything away from Gloria, Tony's face after the meat hits him and he turns to look, because James Gandolfini communicates so many complicated emotions in that moment of, this won't happen again, and I understand now. You know.
I chose it for my number 3, but I can't add to what you guys just did. That's perfect. I love that moment. I love the import of it, the question of meat. And there's just like a little tag where it probably cuts back to Chris and Paul. He's stuck in the woods, and Tony goes over to Junior's house, and Junior says, "You've been eating steak?" Just that little bit. I just think I love that.
Now that we just mentioned that Bobby moment, I want to have a retroactive honorable mention in one of the episodes. How many White Castles did you have? I can smell them.
I didn't, I swear.
Retroactive honorable mention, too, for the, I think it's balled up bits of Italian bread that Meadow is throwing at Junior at the end of the Army of One. Is that correct?
Yep.
My number 1 was Ralphie's apology in He Is Risen. Tony, he looks like a king in that moment. And I mean that in like the classic fantasy sense. It's like fucking, in Return of the King, when he's just the king of Gondor, when he's just like fucking slopping all that shit down while Pippin is singing. He's just sitting there eating his food. Tony eating at Vesuvio. That's his place. That's his home. That's where he's most strong, and he's just projecting such strength there. You see Paul and Silvio like royal guards by the door, there but not paying attention, but within earshot also. And Ralphie has to humble himself. And Tony doesn't invite him to sit. Do you want something? He's just silent, and he puts his fork down. The boss has put his fork down, and you have his full attention, and you have to humble yourself. And Tony's just kind of coaching him along. Oh, for what? I disrespected the Bing and the girl. That's all he has to say.
Yeah, it's an incredible scene.
It's a remarkable scene, and it ends with Tony not saying thank you for saying that, or I appreciate it. We're good, Ralph. Thank you. This was good. Picks up his fork, takes a. Anything else? Rough.
Yeah, Ralph gets
good.
nothing of what he wants in that scene, and Tony gets an ultimate display of power.
Correct. And for that reason, it just stuck with me, and it's a symbol of Tony as boss and how good he is at it, and how cemented he is.
Yeah. This is also a little bit of wishful thinking, and I know it's not quite this, but like, I hope that Ralph got to feel just for 1 second how that girl probably felt like her whole life. You know?
Yes. Oof. Great point. Another retroactive honorable mention, because it didn't come up in our discussion. But let's not forget Artie's very awkward dinner date with Adriana during his midlife crisis date. Yeah. Goes for the hands. She gets up and goes to the bathroom. Oh, poor Artie. So yeah, food moments. A lot of them. Always a lot of great food moments. And it is so central to the show and the aesthetic of the show and the environment of the show.
Yeah, you can't even cover them all. I just thought of another one I didn't mention. I'll try to work it in later. But yeah, there's so much stuff with food on this show.
So my number one food moment is in Fortunate Son.
Yeah.
4 Stitches ruined dinner. If it weren't a food moment, it would probably be a moment for me. It's the best psychological insight that the show has had in the way that it's dramatized. The flashback improves on the look from Down Neck. That's one thing. Never having before seen Livia sexualized like this. As Jordan was mentioning earlier with the take your fucking dinner sequence, sex, meat, bringing home the bacon, all this stuff. It came together and it was obviously too much for Tony at the time. And watching it still sometimes feels a little bit like, whoa. Too much like information, too much coming at you. It's a powerful moment. The roast does look good. But of course it comes after the chopping off the pinky. And the way that it then cuts into it from Tony at his mother's house with the food delivery still coming. Then it cuts right out of it into Tony explaining the story, telling the story to Melfi in therapy. I love the whole thing with Proust's Madeleine and Tony saying, "This sounds very gay." I just think that's really funny. And it makes for a compelling moment. And it really helped characterize that episode, Fortunate Son, which gives us the first taste also of the way in which this hereditary function is going to create problems going forward. So,
Excellently articulated.
I have one. I can't let it lie. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't know. It's not my number one moment. It should have been mentioned. I probably should have replaced the mozzarella with it. I don't know. The date nut bread, guys. Tracy's date nut bread. The first offering to Tony in university.
Yeah.
I can't. I could have put it in great moments on the show, but I have better stuff to talk about in university. But it's specifically that they choose date nut bread. Something that, like, I can't think of something more alien to the world of a stripper, like when you think of strippers in that line of work, than something as wholesome and specific as date nut bread. It's not banana bread. It's not, it's date nut bread. This is something maybe all this girl had was this recipe that would even, like, connect her to, like, a home life in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is what she offers up. It's an incredibly sad, specific choice. And it's a food moment.
Yeah, it makes me sad even thinking about it. And great button at the end of that scene after she walks out of earshot. Tony just looks at Sylvia and goes, "Bread."
Tony says in that scene also, he says, "I have a family and they give me things." And in the sequence just after Silvio picks Tracy up and beats her, they cut to the dinner where Rosalie has made this beautiful tiramisu. And that's the sort of world in order as they see it. Like, we keep these things separate.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about Tracy just now, so this just makes for a good segue because I want to talk about our antagonist this season, or one of many potential antagonists. We got Joe Pantoliano as Ralphie. Great character, ultimately much more sophisticated and complicated than Richie as our antagonist, and
More dangerous.
more dangerous for that reason specifically. And he is cool. Not in the sense that, like, oh man, what a great guy. He's awesome. But I mean, he's a cool character for this show and in this universe, and Joey Pants does a great job with him. Ralphie, he comes in very subtly. They drop him in as if he's always been there. They allude maybe he spent some time down south in Miami, but he's a part of the April crew. He's ambitious. He's an earner. He dresses well. And peekaboo, he comes out in university, and you see him for... You really finally get who this guy is. Thoughts on Ralphie, Joe Pantoliano. And, of course, the very interesting choice. We talked a little bit about how this show in Season 3 did not conclude as cleanly as 1 and 2, but you also need to do that if you're having a prolonged run. They break their formula in what they did with Richie. He comes in at a particular point, 1 or 2 episodes into Season 2, causes havoc, causes chaos, it comes to a boil, and Tony has to, and he ends up getting killed for a reason outside of Tony's control, but it's cleaned up in that sense. Ralphie looks like things are going to go that way, but then Gigi blows a gasket on the shitter, and Tony has to make it work. Very interesting dynamic. Thoughts on Ralphie and his trajectory from top to bottom here.
It is complex. It's one of the things I remember not liking about season 3 when I first watched it. I think because I wanted them to stay with that form. I wanted it to be maybe more predictable. But The Sopranos never wanted to do that. They didn't want to repeat themselves, which allowed them to stay surprising. So it's a gutsy choice, among other things, to make it so that at the end of this season, you have to keep this guy around. He's useful and even reliable. Even though one part of what Tony does is kind of pawn this shitty job of taking care of Jackie Jr. off on Jackie Jr.'s mother's boyfriend. So there's that, but I think it was a great choice. Joey Pants does such great work. I think, as you said, Peekaboo, he comes out in University. Ralphie complicates the mask question. He complicates the faces question, because Richie, I don't think, really had the convincing face of a charming guy. Ralphie does. Ralphie dresses the part, which we've spent a good deal of time on. And it as Jordan said, I think that does make him more dangerous. It also has made him more fun in a lot of ways. He does still have a lot of funny moments. He's a very entertaining character to watch, which is great because he would be too vile to stomach if he weren't.
Richard Prue was up front from moment one. What mine is not yours to give me. I'm old school. He tells you flat out what his deal is, and he sticks to it. He just butted heads with Tony and didn't have that respect for Tony as a commander. Ralphie's much more insidious because he can sit at the table with you. I think of that dinner scene in, I think it's Another Toothpick, where he's just hanging out with Tony, Johnny Sack, Gigi, and they're all just hanging out having dinner. It's like, oh, that's a fun table to be at. Oh, and then he's going to maul a stripper to death in brutal fashion who's carrying his kid.
Yeah. I hate to say this. Like, I think Ralphie's my favorite character in season 3. And I have to, temper that with, I have to reconcile with what he does in University. By favorite, I don't mean I endorse his behavior. Right. I mean, he's my favorite thing to watch. Mm-hmm. For exactly what Paul has said, for, the fact that he has these two faces, he's duplicitous, and that makes him interesting. He has an interesting way of dressing. He's not quite what we've seen before from really anybody. And, yeah, you're right, that there is this really, this clear distinction from the season 2 villain, Richie Aprile, in that Richie wanted what's his. Ralphie wants everything. And there's that distinction too. Ralphie is a great character. He adds incredible interest to every scene he's in. He's able to play it every way, and he reminds me of another character. In Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? There's a character, George Babyface Nelson. It describes, this guy's a real live wire, right? Ralphie's like a manic depressive, basically. He's got these high highs and these low lows, and each one of his masks have that. You know what I mean? So it's like, this guy is he's so dangerous. You don't know what you're going to get from him. You suspect it before University, it's confirmed for you then, and you fear it'll get worse. But every time you see Ralphie, he's like a different Ralphie. It's like, which one am I getting? And you're right. It's like, this is a guy that changes his mask so frequently, you wonder what the fuck is underneath.
You described him, Jordan, in one of the episodes. I can't remember which one of our episodes you mentioned this. It was early on in season 3. But it stuck with me because it's, not a word I would have ever thought of to describe him. But
is it
fits.
Cute?
Cute.
The word is cute.
And it's also a very peculiar word to use about a gangster.
He's cute.
But it fits. He's cute. There's something cute about this guy.
Yes.
That's so eerie.
It is. The cuteness is disarming. Yeah. Because he may be the most dangerous one.
But he's so coiffed and he's so, cute.
And we must also reconcile with that. These other bad men also think of him as being like a bad guy. Like, it's agreed, like, Ralphie's not a good guy. Like, fuck that guy. Like, even amongst other bad men, they're like, oh, Ralph. Jeez.
And it's tough because ultimately a lot of what happens in this life that's depicted on the show is it's about the dollar. And another way Ralphie's dangerous is we're told and shown several times this guy is a big earner. He is a go-getter. He brings it. He does the most important thing you can do in the mob life. Something Chris struggles with shortly after being made. He fucking brings the envelopes, man. That makes it tough. That complicates things every time.
Right. That's a consistent character trait throughout this whole season. Is Ralph is a money machine.
Yep.
It could be the most important factor. I mean, because in season 2, it's briefly mentioned a couple times, but you didn't need to mention it too much, that whatever Richie was doing, usually whatever stunt it was either dumb, like a waste of time, or a problem. Yeah. Something that could cost them money. I think the best idea that he had was the red things instead of the blue.
The coolers, yeah.
The coolers, like, fuck blue. Like, I was like, yeah, that's probably true. But other than that, like, fucking waste of space.
Yeah.
So
Ralphie's not trying to figure out how to sell coke off the garbage routes.
Right.
He's raking it. He's a big picture guy.
No conversation about Ralphie can have the dialogue that Silvio had in season 2. There's nothing to gain by keeping Richie around.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite.
Yeah. Anything else about Ralphie? He's probably going to be on a few character lists.
Yeah,
so.
He's a political player too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's able to talk with people as high status as Johnny Sack and also yuck it up with the boys down low. It's a good all round character. He's probably most similar to Tony in that he can create interesting scenes with any other character.
I'll say this about not Ralphie but Joey Pants. Joe Pantoliano, am I saying that right?
Joe Pantoliano. Yeah.
Joe Pantoliano is not only in this and other like good stuff where he's good, but like distinctive and even like iconic stuff. Like he's in The Matrix.
He's Cypher.
He's in the Goonies, which is one of my favorite movies.
He's in Fugitive and U.S. Marshals, which are both good. He's good in both.
And he's good in this stuff. And this is his career best.
Yeah,
this is his best work. And I can't say enough nice things about this work that he does. I mean, he plays a total piece of shit, as we've talked about, but he himself is a great humanist and does great work. I loved reading, I think, an interview that Jordan sent us about his character and the deliberate choice of the ascots, that he could see this character's face, the faces that he wore, and so I'm just very appreciative of that.
Yeah. He's a smart guy, Joe Pants, and also very funny. He's a down-to-earth, funny guy that you'd love to know.
I also have to mention he's my favorite bit character in Congo. Thank you. Please watch Congo.
Thank you, Jordan.
Amy, good gorilla. Good gorilla.
How much are they paying you?
You have no idea.
You mentioned it. Let's segue into it. Johnny Sack. We don't have to spend a ton of time on him because he's still more of a side character at this point, but elevated for season 3. Johnny Sack is a once or twice per season character in 1 and 2, and we have this interesting development in season 3, which I think peaks in the finale with his conversation with Paulie outside Vesuvio.
Yeah.
Johnny Sack moves to Jersey, and not just Jersey. 8 minutes from Tony's house. He's He's in Tony's backyard. Interesting. If these guys weren't such good friends, I think this would be a bigger problem than it was initially. But Tony is wary, but takes him at face value. Oh, this is our family, and this is the Sopranos family. But he notices Ralphie talking to him at the party, the homecoming, the
housewarming.
The housewarming.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Housewarming party. So Johnny Sack's around, and he's nosing. He's nosing a little bit. He says he's not going to stick his beak in, but he certainly gets involved in the Ralph thing with, getting that apology to happen. And then at the end with Paulie. So I love Johnny Sack. I love Vince Curatola. I think the character has presented well the few times we've seen him before this, but this is an elevation, and it's an omen, I think, that the presence of the New York family is going to start playing a larger role in the show proper. Thoughts on Johnny Sack and the New York family?
I don't have many. I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I just will say I really like that actor, and I was excited to see more of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's it, because some of it is a slow burn, but it's always such a pleasure to see Vincent Curatola play Johnny Sack. Could be a funny scene, could be a bit more serious. I like all those aspects of it. Also, even though he says, I'm not going to stick my beak in, and we see him move back and forth on that a bit, there is another sequence, I think, also in that same episode when he moves to Jersey, Employee of the Month, where they're talking about the Riverfront Esplanade by Newark on the TV, and this seems like a joint effort, where the New York family that Johnny Sack is in will benefit from what's going on in the Jersey waterfront.
Yeah. A lot of big things happening. A lot of setup for season 4, I think, it feels like. And that's not a spoiler. That's just, none of that gets resolved. It just sort of exists, and it's on the plate. What's going to happen with Johnny Sack. We also meet Carmine Lupertazzi for the first time. He's the boss of the family, Johnny Sack's boss. Johnny Sack is sort of an underboss intermediary between Jersey and New York. So we get a little bit more sense of the structure going on over there. So interesting. I am excited to see where it goes in season 4. And Vince Chiarotola's an awesome actor, so
Yeah,
it's
he's
only
great.
going to go somewhere good. I think it's time for another top 3.
Top 3.
Top 3. Oh my god, Paul, with the drums, I can't.
I think we're getting better.
Again with the drums.
We got to be careful because that top 3 bullshit that we spew out is going to start sounding good if we don't fix it.
We should do one like professionally. Like have
Denmark.
Have one produced.
Like actual chords. We're going to go into top 3 quotes.
This is the hardest category
This
every
is always
time.
the hardest. I said this to you guys in our pre-show. I could have done a top 10 quotes just from fucking Pine Barrens. So, quotes is always tough, but you got to do it. It's a very quotable show. So, you got to have a quotes category.
Yeah, I think you're the only one that hasn't gotten to go first yet, right?
I went first for music. You went
I'm
first
sorry.
for food. I think Paul's going to kick us off for quotes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, great.
All right, cool. I have a ton of honorable mentions. All right. Honorable mention, Paulie. I'm telling you, they're poison. That's from Pine Barrens. Another quote from Pine Barrens is Chris saying, "I'll leave you here, you one-shoe cocksucker." In Second Opinion, Furio says, "Stupid a fucking game."
Perfect.
In Another Toothpick, Sally, remember Mustang Sally? He says, "Oh, this guy I know, he fucks the lady whose house it is." I just always like, he fucks the lady whose house it is. Major Zwingli, Tobin Bell's character, tag on the scene in Army of One day at a time.
Yeah.
Last honorable mention, Paulie from To Save Us All from Satan's Power. The boss of this family told you you're Santa Claus. You're Santa Claus. So shut the fuck up about it. All right. Number 3 quote. This is from Employee of the Month. This is Melfi. "Hello, Kate. This is Jennifer Melfi. I know talking on the phone upsets you, but I need to cancel our next appointment."
Excellent.
Very nice. I love that.
We got the bells. We got the
have
church
the bell.
bells.
We
with
have
us.
to. Wouldn't
We have
be
our
a-
lucky church bells with us for Soprano Sunday dinner.
It would not be a Sopranos podcast episode, particularly a retrospective, without the church on my corner back on its bullshit.
We love it.
My number 3 quote comes from Paulie in Pine Barrens. It's an exchange more than an individual quote. Tony is talking to Paulie. It keeps cutting in and out. They're getting bits and pieces of each other. Tony's frustrated. He just came from Slava's meeting. Tells Paulie that this guy they're hunting down was part of the Interior Ministry and killed 16 Chechen rebels. Paulie, this is the exchange that I'm putting as my number 3, hangs up the phone. "You're not going to believe this. Guy killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Oh, he killed 16 Czechoslovakians. Guy was an interior decorator." Chris says his house looked like shit. So that exchange is my number 3.
My number 3, one of the most obnoxious things I've ever heard on this show, comes... Well, I guess I'll do the quote first, right? "Folks thought Hawks invented the genre with Scarface, but Cagney was modernity. Mooney was not, so I give the nod to William Wellman. That is, of course, Noah Tannenbaum in Proshai Lavushka."
Number 2 quote is at Chris's making ceremony, the after party at Vesuvio in Fortunate Son. Bit of an exchange here. The quote is, it starts with Carmine Lupertazzi. He wants to say there's no stigma. And he says, "There's no stigmata these days. For Christ's sake, Julius Caesar was an epileptic." The quote is Tony's response, "I'm not an epileptic." Just that line and the way Gandolfini does it.
My number 2 comes from Junior Soprano in He Is Risen. I have a lot of stuff from He Is Risen in this
Good episode.
retrospective. It's a great idea. But he's recovering from cancer. Tony goes to see him, fills him in on the Ralphie situation, and they're coming to the conclusion. Tony says, "I don't see an answer." And Junior says, quote, "Who says there is one? That's what being a boss is. You steer the ship the best way you know. Sometimes it's smooth. Sometimes you hit the rocks. In the meantime, you find your pleasures where you can."
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I thought it was a very insightful and sweet moment from Junior, a character who is usually cursing or embroiled in some indignity. I thought that was a dignified... It was just cool to see that, Mo. I liked that quote.
Yeah. My number 2 quote is from Paulie in Fortunate Son. I think it's in the same scene that Paul's quote was just from. This is Paulie. Paulie Walnuts. "You're a made guy now. It's your turn to make some real money. I get to relax a little. Your only problem in life now is you give me 10 points of your take every settle up day. Other than that, you got no problem. My only problem in life, I gotta kick my points up to that man over there. And onward it goes, this thing of ours. When you think of all the headaches most human beings have in life, ours are all boiled down to only one. Not a bad deal, right? I enjoyed it because it sounded Shakespearean to me.
Yeah.
It had like this sing-song, almost verse quality, and Chris is like in a trance listening to Paulie talk about this. Like he's finally a part of this thing. This is the arrangement. And it actually sounds more poetic than anything Tony said during the actual making ceremony in the previous scene. And I like the way, I think, Paulie does a hell of a job delivering the line. I think it's great.
Well, I'm glad you guys have these thoughtful quotes. Speaking of Shakespeare, straighten it out. My number one quote from season 3 is Bobby Bocciolieri in Pine Barrens. One time, we went hunting. We saw a sign that said "Bear left," so we went home.
Love it. My number one quote is actually spoken twice in season 3 by the same character, and therefore I'm going to include both instances. But it is simply, "Poor you," as delivered by Gloria Trillo, both at the Bronx Zoo and in Amor Fou at the climax of that confrontation when Tony finally makes the connection and realizes what's happening. Poor you.
My number one is one word. It's an exchange, or it's part of an exchange. It's the very final line of Employee of the Month. Tony looks at Melfi and says, "What, you want to say something?" There's a tense pause, and then she just says, "No."
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I fucking love these.
Awesome. Excellent quotes, guys. I love it. This retrospective is cooking along.
It's cooking.
Cooking, baby. Like Artie Bucco.
Baby.
Hey everyone, thank you so much. This was part 1 of our Season 3 retrospectives. Join us in the next episode for part 2, in which we're going to talk about the journey of the women in The Sopranos in more detail, particularly Dr. Melfi and Carmela. We're going to respond to some listener mail that we got, a lot of awesome comments and emails from our listeners. We're going to respond to those, and we're also going to continue our top 3s, including top 3 characters and performances, top 3 moments, and top 3 episodes. You don't want to miss it. Sopranos Season 3 retrospective part 2, next episode. Thank you so much.
Got myself a girl.